Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nihiyeh b'dvarai. Okay, Chevra, good morning, good Erev Shabbos to everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Apologies for the slight delay. I'm setting up a new computer and getting it connected, which we are connected. Chazei Hashem. And also apologies for the break yesterday and the day before that. Hopefully from today on we'll be much more consistent. Be'ezras Hashem. Today's shiur is sponsored by Zev Klein, Li'lu Nishmas, his parents, Rivka Bryndel, Simcha, and Ya'akov ben Yeshayahu, the Neshama Shel Ben Aliyah, also dedicated as a zechus for refuah sheleimah for Chaim Yehoshua ben Chaya Miriam. We should only hear Besuris Tovis Be'ezras Hashem. Okay, so let's jump back into Torah Lamed Vav. Just a quick recap from what we had learned the previous 2 days. We didn't learn all that much text inside, but it's very, very deep. And so we were talking about in Eis Aleph the klal that the 70 original members of Yaakov Avinu's family, which we make reference to obviously in the beginning of this week's parsha, are keneged the shivim umais, which themselves both correspond to the 70 faces of the Torah, the shivim panim, right, of the interpretation of the Torah, both of which are referred to in orientation toward that Torah. Klal Yisrael, who are much more naturally connected to the energy of the Torah, which we described as an energy of balance, an energy of midos tovos, right, the proper measurements, knowing exactly how much or how little of certain things to have and to live with the mishkal, to live with that sense of discernment with regard to how to utilize our midos in different contexts and circumstances, as opposed to the shivim umas ha'olam, which each have a midah ra'ah, right? Which means, like we said, a midah is just a measurement. Midah ra'ah means an imbalance. And so the umas ha'olam have imbalances, midos ra'os. And this is, of course, general statements. You can find yesh v'yesh, dar chasidu umas ha'olam have midas taivos, dar yidin, individual yidin have midas ra'os, right? So it's not a blanket statement. But in terms of its general orientation, this is basically the way that Rabbi Nachman sets it up. And every member of Klal Yisrael, before we're able to go ahead and to access the shivim panim of Torah, which are aligned with our own identity, we need to go into galus by the midas of the nations of the world. Every member of Klal Yisrael has to go through that process. Menasin u'mitzarfin. We spoke about this being the ceiling of growth. A person gets tested, a person gets challenged, and then a person learns, right? Whether a person is oimid ben isayin, or whether a person, despite their best efforts, falls and has a yerida. This causes for a person to call out to Hashem, to cry out, to refine who they are, what they want, what they're all about, to self-correct, to look back and learn from their mistakes, and to find their way of proceeding and progressing and evolving. And we spoke about this in the context of birth, in the context of the experience of labor, pregnancy, ibur, which means that whatever it is that is ultimately going to emerge into the world is hidden, is concealed, is hidden inside. Ka'atsamim bibeten malaya. And then in order for birth to occur, in order for a person to be able to rise to the next level of their development, there's going to be a labor process, going to be difficult, challenging, painful, intense, chaotic, difficult, as anybody knows, right, has been present in such an experience. It's a moment of chaos. It's a moment of uncertainty and pain and chaos and intensity. And that's what we go through when we go through those experiences in life. Again and again and again throughout our journeys, we go through these experiences of sending up 70 cries to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yancha Hashem b'yom tzara, that mizmar is 70 words. And we're crying out 70 times to be cleansed from the midas of the 70 nations, to enable ourselves to go ahead and to connect and to access the 70 faces, the shivim panim of the Torah. And then, what was hidden, ka'atsamim bebeten amaleya, v'anoichi hastir astir, which we said is the relationship with Hashem, ultimately is born. And the Rebbe uses, as an example for this, Moshe Rabbeinu, to the one hand, and then La'avdil, Bilam Harasha. Moshe Rabbeinu is the Klalius Kalatayra. He is Gematria Taryag. Moshe Rabbeinu is Gematria Taryag. Therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu, who needs to get to that level, goes through such a bureau process in his own life. We spoke very much about the Tzaddik Emes and the extra aspect of cleansing and distinction that's required for them. But for the rest of Klal Yisrael, Lav Dafka. But for Moshe Rabbeinu, HaKadosh Baruch Hu commands him, Va'ata pai amoid imadi. Hashem says, separate yourself, mikol v'kol, even beheter, from his actual wife. And therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu is accessing Das Kol Yisrael. He goes through the ultimate labor, comes out on the other side, and accesses the ultimate revelation. Even though, again, just like we said, for the regular laymen, because they weren't told that, nobody else was commanded that, that's not necessarily the way to reach Kedusha, right? And we spoke about that at length. But Bilam is the hepech of this. Bilam is Keneged Moshe the Klipa. Bilam is the aspect of, also on the level of his name, is reflective of the whole entire Torah, because the Beis is the first letter of the Torah, the Lamed is the last letter of the Torah, the Ayin is the Shivim Panim Shel Torah, and then the Mem is Keneged the Mem Yom Shenit the Torah. And we learned, we spoke a lot about the potential that Bilam had. If he would have recognized his challenges as such, and instead of giving up, he would have said, it's a labor process. On the contrary, now is not the time to give up. Now is the time to push past these impulses so that we can ultimately access the birth. We can ultimately access the Hisgalus, the revelation of that which was concealed. Moshe Rabbeinu, we spent a lot of time on this, at least according to the Tiferes Yisrael, was actually born with terrible midas, had to work through all of them, and therefore was able to get where he got. And we said, and distilled, I think quite powerfully, the essence of Emunah is whether a person is giving up hope or whether a person realizes Ancient Yush, Ba'ilam Klal, and is eradicating that Amalekian force that wants to weigh a person down and try to convince a person that there's no hope. And this whole contextualization turns that on its head, because Rabbi Nachman says, what do you mean there's no hope? You want to think there's no hope because things are going tough, so tough that mamish, it doesn't look like it'll get better. That's called labor, right? The woman also doesn't think it'll ever end, right? So what do you need to do? Cry out to Hashem. Obviously, we have not yet gone through that process of whatever that does to us. It refines us, it humbles us, it squishes us like, this person squeezed an olive to enable the oil to emerge, to enable the wine, to flow forth from the grapes, like the Medrash describes. That's a Klal Yisrael and Imshel, to olives, to grapes. This is how it goes. It's true for our nation as a whole. When we go through challenges, the more we go through challenges, it brings out the best in us. I spoke last night. We were in Manchester earlier in the week at the Aleinu conference, and the conference was at the Heaton Park Synagogue with Rabbi Walker. Right? He was an incredibly courageous leader, just an amazing, amazing man. And so he told the whole story over there, and he was basically, I said this at great length last night, so I'll just say Bekitzer, for the chaver were there. I said, he said that he, mamish, thought that the shul was finished. He didn't think people would come back. That was where the terror attack happened on Yom Kippur. And he thought that he was afraid for the future of the shul. And people are too traumatized. It's not a huge kehillah. And people aren't going to come back. And the first Shabbos after Sukkot, Shabbos Parshas Bereishis, the entire Manchester Kehillah, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people from all the shuls, came out and filled the space. He said there was not an inch of carpet to stand on. He said you couldn't move. Hundreds and hundreds to capacity. And he stood up there with tears running down his face, he described, realizing that not just is the shul not finished, lahepech, the yeser se'es of the yeseros. Adding strength. So these experiences, we know that they bring out the best in us. One of the sweet Yidden, Menachem, one of the chevra listens to the SHIURIM, amazing Jew. So he sent me a message yesterday. He was listening to what I said about Iran and about about how Klal Yisrael are compared to the sand, right, where the whole ocean wants the mighty ocean, right, is trying to assault the land, wave after wave, and it hits the sand, the beach, and at the shoreline, and it fades away. See, he said an amazing thing. He said, and not only is it true that the beach, the sand, prevents the water from rushing the shoreline and overtaking, generally speaking, right, overtaking the land, But he said, you see that when the water comes up against the sand, it has a unifying effect. It brings all these separate pieces of sand into one clump, right? Through bringing water. And he said this is the same way that it is with Klal Yisrael. Not only do they come up against us, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu matzilenu miyadam, it has a positive effect on Klal Yisrael. It brings us together. I thought that was so beautiful. I wanted to share that with us. So then ein shem yesh b'olam klal, right? You don't give up. It's part of a process. You bounce back. You come back better and stronger, and this is how it goes for the individual as well. And we said the same thing is true for Yosef Tzaddik, and that's pretty much what we had learned of Torah Lamed Vav. Okay, let's continue. We're right now on the paragraph Ubishvil Zeh. So we had just learned that the Torah HaKadosha can be summarized into the concepts of Chochmah and Binah. Because that was Yosef Tzaddik. Yosef, who himself went through his labor process and his incredible challenges and the pain that he experienced and everything else. Memela, he was zochet to the Torah, because then it said, Ein Navain v'chacham kamaycha. Navain being a reference to Binah, which is itself a reference to Torah, because the pasuk says Imla Bina Tikra, which is a reference to Torah. V'chacham kamaycha is a reference to Chachma, and it says about Torah Reishis Chachma. Torah is called Reishis, and it is connected to the concept of Chachma. So Memela, you see from here that the Torah is associated with Chachma and Bina. So now says the Rebbe, Ubishvil zeh darshu chachamenu zechanu levracha. Now that we've just learned about Chochmah and Binah, and that Torah ultimately that we're trying to access, which is the hisgalus of Hashem's presence in our lives, is wrapped up into the musagim of Chochmah and Binah, and you have to go through challenges. So therefore, Chazal darshan al pasuk achrei levavchem ve'achrei einechem. That achrei levavchem zeh minus. Achrei levavchem is a reference to Avodah Zarah. And going after one's eyes is the aspect of adultery, as the Gemara tells us. First the eyes see, then the leiv wants, and then the Ivarim are acting out on that impulse. And you see Gam Shimshon halach acher einav, right? Shimshon also, who went through that experience, conflicting Mamar Chazal about who he was exactly, what he was, but the general consensus is that he was a big tzaddik, a great tzaddik, but ultimately, on his level, Gam Shimshon halach acher einav, right? It all started with his eyes. As the pasuk says, he saw in Isha Plishtis. Gam Bilam nikra shesum ayin. Bilam, who we just mentioned, is also called shesum ayin. He's also called the one who's blinded. He's a blinded sight. His vision is nifgam, is blemished. Machmashahu klalius mida ra'a shal midas ra'a shal hashivim lashim. We said the ultimate mida is niyuf, right? The ultimate, this aspect of immorality is the primary place of struggle, is the primary place of labor, right? Every person on their madriga, on their level. And Memela, just having learned about Chochmah and Binah, this is achrei levavchem ve'achrei einechem. Levavchem is Binah, because Binah liba. And so a person is challenged with thoughts of fira, with thoughts of distancing from bitachon and emunah, with all of the associated traits that come along with that, right? Our egoic identity, our baser tendencies, our reactivity, our dimyon, right? All of that, our bahamius, which we're going to learn more about in Torah Lamed Vav, Torah Lamed Zayin, that's Hashem. That's the lower self, and that's associated with Binah. So in other words, in order to access the Binah of Torah, because the Torah is Chochmah and Binah, a person has to go through Acharei Levavchem and be tested in that Nisayu. And in order to access the world of Chochmah, of Torah, which is generally the Nistar of Torah, the bigger picture themes, right, Agada, and so on, that's generally associated with Chochmah, a person has to go through Acharei Nechem, the Tziruv, and the Birur and the Libun of challenges with Shmir Seinayim, and working on that and going through the process of crying out. So in other Sfarim, they'll just tell you, guard your eyes. And Rabbi Nachman, he tells you, it's a painful process. And it's the process of struggling and working on and crying over, as we're going to see, and crying out, and it's that's what does it. That's what does it. Hashem has millions of malachim or Shem Reinayim. They don't have a challenge with it. But it says daika in the pasuk that we're going to say in Shachris, we said yesterday and the day before, hopefully, and we say every morning and evening. And the next words are crucial. There's no reason for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to have put the next words in there. Asher atem zoinim achareim. Why is that necessary? Could have just said, period. And we know by implication that these are things that we struggle with. HaKadosh Baruch Hu puts it in Asher atem zoinim achareim. The Baal Tanya, if I'm not mistaken, writes somewhere, I can't remember if it's in Tanya or somewhere else I saw, that what a privilege that we are zoinim achareim, so that we get to fulfill. Person wants to be free from the taiva. Person wants to be free from the challenge. There's no such thing. Adarabba, there's value and benefit to a person who's stuck and feels this impulse constantly to grow and to evolve, and is working through this process. The ups and the downs, again, everything relative to different levels and what people are working on. Different inyanim in this whole realm of kedusha. There's myriad levels at kedei, But that this idea of the ra'amas ayin kalin, of the crying out, of the desperation, of the whole parsha related to this. This is access to Pnimiyas HaTorah. Pnimiyas HaTorah is what you find, generally speaking, the people who are drawn to Pnimiyas. This is a general comment, but it's generally true. Our people have struggles in this area. It's generally true. So it seems. Especially Breslov. Because the Rebbe speaks about it so clearly and plainly and directly. So people feel like there's a space to be able to be seen and understood. And according to what the Rebbe is saying over here, these two things are makbil, they're aligned. This, that a person wants to access the deepest realms, they're going to have to be tested in this area. And it makes total sense. Because what's the whole desire to learn Pnimiyas HaTorah? Is to be megala, right? It's to reveal. That's what it is. It's a reveal. It's a impulse and an orientation toward revelation. Or you could put it in another nusach. It's an orientation toward boundarylessness, which is the world of Pnimiyas. It's not a world of definition. It's a world of mystery. It's a world of mystery, Amish. And so there's a deep desire in the nefesh to be megale. And if expressed negatively, it becomes gili arayis. Right? It becomes the desire to just see everything and know everyone in the deepest possible way. And it becomes a destructive force. It's called chesed without chabura, right? The Torah tells us a person and his sister. There is a chesed. Chesed, yeah. Because that's the impulse that it is. So the challenge is to be able to recognize what this midah ra'ah is as it's expressing itself begashmias, right? Like I just mentioned, which is a desire to reveal and a desire to connect to something that's beyond limitation, even if for a moment at a time. But a person wants to experience ecstasy, right? Total shattering of an experience of stuckness and limitation. And instead to channel that into the realm of Sisrei Torah. That's what it is. That's where these two things are. And to build a relationship with the Torah that's intimate, so that al tikr marasha ala ma'irasa, and to marry the Torah kipshuta, with all that entails, with consummating the marriage, so to speak, which means to reveal layer upon layer upon layer of the Torah's garment, and finally to become one with the Torah itself. Like the Zohar Kadosh describes the Torah having many layers, and woe, says the Zohar, to those who only see the outside garments and who don't get to know the Torah deeply in its essence. So it's so beautiful the way that the Rebbe is setting it up. Achrei levavchem is connected to the Binah, and that's working out, the theology and that aspect. And Achrei Nechem is connected to the Chochmah, the Torah, to the Pnimiyas. But be that as it may, a person has to go through these two things And then a person's able to access the cleansing, the cleanliness of the eyes that's going to rectify Shimshan halachachar einav, was a reference to Arayas, right? Bilam nikr shesum ayin, what do we learn about Bilam? He was with his donkey, right? The idea das elyon, like the Gemara says, Aschen iskanti. So a person rectifies their eyes. A person rectifies that which is referred to in the Torah as Ra be'enei Hashem. Al pi pshat, Ra be'enei Hashem means that Hashem didn't like what Aaron and Einon were doing. But Al pi pnimius, Ra be'enei Hashem means this is an act that is going to be Ra to your Einei Hashem al tzadikim, like Rabbi Nachman says, which we've been learning so much about. A person's way of being able to show up in the world and to see godliness, to see elukus. Rabbi Nachman said that explicitly in one of the other Torahs, right? That if a person wants to see godliness, hasagas elukus, it comes through from the Shmiras Einayim, one of the Torahs. So that's what we're referring to here. Okay. Lefikach, therefore, kishakarim pasuk rishon shel Kriya Shema. When a person reads the first pasuk of Kriya Shema, tzarich lahatzim es einov. This is why it's brought in the Zohar Kadosh and Arizal. A person needs to cover their eyes. Right? This is Minig Yisrael across the board. I don't know of any chelik of Klal Yisrael who doesn't cover their eyes by Kriya Shema. Amazing thing. It's not in Chazal. Universal. I think it's right. I think it's universal. Does anybody know of? I don't think so. Right? There are different ways. As far as like this. Everybody covers their eyes.
With their hand.
With their hand. What's pshat? What is this? Where does this come from? So there are different interpretations of it, but it comes from the Arizal. And Arizal says that the reason that we do this is because bibechinas ulimta shapirta de lesle einen. The Zohar makes a reference to Malchus as in ulimta shapirta, a beautiful girl, de lesle einen, who has no eyes. De lesle einen. What does this mean? Ulimta shapirta de lesle einen, a beautiful young child, a young girl that doesn't have eyes. What's the inyan? So we learned in Torah Aleph that the only way to access ches, which is chach mi'ilah, the light of the sun, is through its reflection in the light of the moon. The only way to access the light of the sun is going to be through the light of the moon. Our friend Makiva Znaimer is about to put out a song called Moonlight, and it's all about Torah Aleph. And the refrain is, you can only see the sunlight reflected in the moonlight. And that's what Torah Aleph says, right? You can only access the ches, the chach mi'ilah of the sun through the moon. What was the moon? So the moon is bittul. The moon is humility. The moon is the les lemegar meklum, right? The moon is, I haven't arrived at this truth through my philosophizing. My philosophizing brought me to a dead end, and I realized at the end of the day, there's an inyan of acceptance. There's an inyan of being teachable. There's an inyan of showing up humbly, patiently. The lesle einen means, I don't think that I am the leader. Right? The Einei Ha'eda is a reference in Chazal to the leaders of the generation. They're called the Einei Ha'eda. We learned this also in one of the Torahs. Because a person who's leading needs to have einayim. Somebody who's following doesn't need to have einayim. They just need to put a hand on the shoulder of the person in front of them and walk, essentially. They don't need to know where they're going. Ulemta shapirta de lesle einen means that Malchus has no eyes. Malchus is the levana that's mekabel. The lesle megame klum doesn't have anything of its own. It stands in a posture of receiving. There is no greater declaration of our faith than Shema Yisrael and Baruch Shem. It's the essence of activating. It's called Kabbalas al Malchus Shemaim, right? It is activating the desire to bring upon ourselves the Malchus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So in that moment, Ulemta Shapirta de lesle einen. The lesle einen. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'm not shimshan halach achar einav. I don't have eyes. I'm holich after you. After your einayim. Einay Hashem al tzadikim. Eretz asher tamed einay Hashem lekecha ba mereshis hashana v'ad achar shana. Achrei Hashem lekechem telechu. I'm following you. This is the bittul of covering the eyes. Lem teshapir to the lesle einen. I'm not leading my life. I'm just following. I'm following along with your plan. And therefore I'm accepting of whatever is going to unfold today. Right? So today in Shachars. So whatever is going to happen to me today, Hashem, the lesle einen. I don't have eyes. I don't know what to do today. I had my plan this morning, last night. I'm saying in front of you today, I'm following you. That's what Shema is. Amazing thing. Imagine that. Person walks out of Shema without eyes. Following. Who are you following? You're following the Ratzon Hashem. The Ratzon Hashem. And I'll remind you, the Ratzon Hashem is the Lichat Chila. Means however many things go wrong today, right? Which invariably there are frustrations, different, adjustments to our lives and schedules and things and people and, like I've said in the past, so much of what happens to us is well beyond our bechira. Right? If we really reflect on the past week, like how much happened because we made it happen, how much happens because we live in a dynamic, interconnected society with circumstances, with other people's choices, with things that go on in the world. V'chule, v'chule, v'chule. V'chule. The book that I mentioned is called The Black Swan. I think I mentioned it. Fascinating book. And he's a financial planner. He's an expert. He's on Wall Street for many, many years. Lebanese guy, Taleb, I think his name is. Nissim Taleb, if I'm not mistaken. And he writes this whole book about how you really can't predict anything. You can't predict anything. The whole industry is a total joke. Because nobody could account for black swan events. It's just an illusion to give ourselves the sensation of certainty, but he says and it's a big, thick book. He says across longer time scales, every industry has been disrupted by things that nobody could have foretold. So he says most of it is there for entertainment, and he's an expert in this. He says it's pashut. You read, futures like forecasts, financial forecasts for the next 40 years. Like he says, it's sheker v'chazav. He says it's mamish, and he proves this with statistics. It's shocking. Really, really required reading. It's a shocking book, and it's a humbling book. Because it reminds us that although we're desperately trying to grasp whatever is going to unfold in my day today, lichatchila from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, my job in the morning is to cover my eyes and say, I'm following you. I'm following you.
David Lieberman says a good line. He says, nothing happens to you, it happens for you.
That's right. That happens for us. I say if it's not going my way, it's going his way. Everything's HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So this, says the Rebbe, this is the tikkun. Ki tikkun shal hirhurei nus, which we just referenced, is this deep desire on the part of the individual to tear away every curtain and to break past every boundary. It's an egoic desire, right? It's an egoic desire. It's a lower impulse. The tikkun for that, Shabala Adam, is Shayomar Shema Ubar Shem. Rav Nassan says in Likutei Moharan, it means mamish afanar, like on that spot. A person's in an Isayin, you stop and you say Shema and Baruch Shem. Huh? The Gemara is that a Gemara?
It's just three things.
And one is to say Shema?
Yeah, that's the
Oh, is that the first one?
Yeah.
I think that's the first one.
Okay.
So, and if it doesn't work.
Right, so then Yamamisa. Yeah.
That's the final result.
Okay, amazing. So this is it. So the Rebbe is explaining why. Sheyoymar Shema u'Baruch Shem. So here the Rebbe says deeper. Ki taivas niyafu ba me'achiras damim hainu mitchal. This is very powerful. He says taivas niyuf comes metaphysically, kabbalistically from the tchal, which is the spleen. Shehi, can't even say it out of your mouth. Lamed Yud Taf, it's a name of a demon. She Shivcha Bisha, which is also referred to in the Zohar Kadosh all over the place as the Shivcha Bisha, the negative maidservant. Ima de Eirev Rav, who's called the mother of the Eirev Rav. She Malchus Harisha, which is the theoretical embodiment, the conceptual embodiment of the opposite of Malchus the Kedusha that we just described at length, which is Kabbalah Sal Malchus Shemayim, Malchus Harisha, which is the arrogance of Ana Emloich, right? Which is I'm the only one within I am, and it's my way or the highway. There's no other way. She Malchus Harisha. This is very important because the Rebbe here, in connecting Tavis Niyov to the Tchal, is telling us that there's a deep correlation between this taiva and sadness. Because we know that there are arba marais, right? There are 4 different biles, which are, again, not necessarily physical substances, but there are 4 metaphysical energies within the body that are each centered in different Avarim, different organs. And the Mara Shchaira, right, the black bile, which is always a reference to depressive tendencies, sadness, comes from the Tchal. Mara Shchaira comes from the Tchal. So the Rebbe makes a connection between hopelessness, sadness, cynicism, and this taiva. I want to just explain that for a moment. I think that there are 2 manifestations of hopelessness, generally. One manifestation of hopelessness we're much more familiar with because it is much more overt. It expresses itself much more clearly, and it is simply giving up, not being able to get out of bed in the morning, being depressed. Right? A person can't move, a person can't do anything. That's one expression of hopelessness. Less common, but just as potent, maybe even more potent, is an experience of hopelessness that instead of manifesting as a person saying, I'm not able to do anything, manifests in a person saying, I am now able to do everything. Because anyway, I've given up. Meaning there's no... It is also a rejection of structure.
No consequences.
No consequences. Anything goes. Anything.
I have nothing to lose.
I have nothing to... Exactly.
Should be when you drive, you should be the most careful on the road from the guy with the banked car because he doesn't
have anything to lose, right?
Yeah.
So one of them. Think of this. I want to say this clear as a deep idea. Hope is structure. Because hope means that we assume the principle of progress. And progress is not chaos, right? Progress requires order. It requires step 1, and then step 2, and then step 3. And you can't do millions of other steps on the side because there's a process. Hope is structure. Right? Hopelessness manifests in 2 forms: sinking below the structure to say I can't do anything, and there's no use even doing anything because it's Nistar, or blowing past the structure. Which is saying now, it's not pshat, I can't get out of bed. I get out of bed, but I can do whatever I want. I can do whatever I want. See this by teenagers. There's 2, and they're both expressions of hopelessness, because they're both rejections of the concept of structure. Znus, right, which we're talking about over here, blowing past all structures, right? The rejection of Misha Amalai Lamai Dai, right, of boundaries, borders, is b'shayrish an expression of hopelessness. It's a strange thing. This midah, this experience, is the most passionate life. It's mamish, lively, like mamish, alive. This whole Indian of znus is not depressive. On the contrary, there are people who, because they're depressed, can't have a relationship with their wife because the parts of them aren't working. You understand? Because they're dead. This requires life. It's chiyas. But now we're explaining that lehepich. Sometimes it's a principle of hopelessness that allows a person to act on will without feeling any concern for consequence on any level, because deep down, I feel that anyway I'm finished. I may as well. The Rebbe says it's all tchal. It all has to do with hope. It all has to do with hope. That's why Amalek, which is the pinnacle of hopelessness, asher karcha baderech, which is to cool us off. It's like paradoxical. Karcha, and the same word as carry. Carry is not kar, right? Carry, that act, or that whole inyan is cham ma'od, right? It's full of heat. It's full of vibrancy, full of warmth and life and lebedekai. Says Rabbi Nachman, no. It's k'koifef ne'adam. It's not real life. It's not really real liveliness. It looks like liveliness, but it's actually kar ma'od. It's actually extreme cold. Extreme cold. That can result as one of the data points, so to speak, in the algorithm of what this struggle is, and there's so many different layers and aspects and levels. This is one of those ingredients of the cake. Is this. So the Rebbe says, just think, Kitayvas Niv, Iba Mi'achiras Damim, Hainu Mitchol, Shehi Lamed Yotaf, this feminine, this female demonic energy, Shehi Shivcha Bisha, Ima de Eirev Rav, Shehu Malchus Risha. And that's a world of chaos. That's a world of Malchus Risha, a world of Ana Emloich, a world of rejecting HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence in millions of ways. Umalchus Shmaya, but being Mekabel Malchus Shemayim, which is the Indian of Olem Teshapir to the Lesle Einen, where a person is in a state of bittul, a person is the Levana, Lesla Megami Klum, and person Mamish brings Hashem into their life. Hiba Bechinas Gevirta. This is the aspect not of the maidservant of the home, but of the matriarch of the family, the Gevirta, the princess, the queen. Isha Yiras Hashem Hitis Halal. This was this tremendous basin that Shlomo Amalek created, which was standing on 12 cattle that he created, which the Zohar Kadosh says is connected to the 12 Shevatim. Because when a person is connecting to the Yam Shel Shlomo is the in a Malchus, so Shlomo Amelech, right? A person is connected to the Yam Shel Shlomo that's supported by the 12 Bakar, which is the 12 Shevatim. In that moment, we're going back and connecting ourselves to the root of our souls, which is the 70 members of Klal Yisrael's family. It's a Pella that we're learning this. Mamish Erev B'Shabbos Parsha Shmais. This is literally what we're talking about in this week's Parsha. Not just the Shevatim, that was last week's Parsha. The Shevatim and their family members, the 70 Nefesh. Eirev Rav. And in that moment, we disassociate ourselves from the ever-present doubt that exists in each Jewish mind, or at least should. Maybe I'm the Eirev Rav. We have to live with that. Maybe I'm the Eirev Rav. You have to learn about what the Eirev Rav is. We learn about what their traits are. Sometimes you got to wonder. I do. How do I know? How do I know if I'm Mamish a Yid? How do I know if I'm Mamish a Yid? Maybe I'm the Eirev Rav, based on some of my midas. So the Zohar Kadosh and Yiddishkeit sets up, there's like this ever-present existential concern. Today, the hepech happens where everybody knows for sure that they're not the Eirev Rav, but everybody they disagree with must be the Eirev Rav. This is the culture we live in today. It's supposed to be the punkt vakar.
In my yeshiva, if you smoked, you were called the Eirev Rav.
Oh, you're the Eirev Rav. There are millions of things you could do to be called the Eirev Rav, right? And everybody else's Yid is everybody else's Eirev Rav, you understand? So the Zionists are the Eirev Rav, to the Zionists, the Satmars are the Eirev Rav, to the Satmars, the Lubavitchers, the Lubavitchers, everybody's the Eirev Rav, right? Shtiyot. What's the truth? The truth is that mibechinati, everybody else is a Yid. But I'm not so sure about myself. That's the truth. Because once we have built into our theology this fundamental, I always have to be on alert. I have to know. Remember the Piasetzner Rebbe, when it came to his 40th birthday, we learned this together from Sava's ears. What was his tefillah to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? What did he want? He said, Hashem, I can't learn any more than I learn. I can't daven any more than I possibly daven. Rebbe Shalom, Gaireni. Be Megair me. I want to be a Yid today. Turn me into a Yid. I feel like a portrait of a Yid, but I feel like I'm missing. This is the way tzaddikim lived, right? This was their consciousness. A person lives with this. So in the moment of Shema Yisrael, I umafresh es nishmasai min nishmas Eirev Rav. Rabbi Nachman is saying, you know something? There's no Eirev Rav and Yid. This person is the Eirev Rav. It's an energy. One day you could be Eirev Rav, and one day you graduated. Umafresh es nishmasai min nishmas Eirev Rav. You disassociate your neshama from the nishmas Eirev Rav, which we're understanding now being connected to the inyan of the shivcha bisha, malchus or rasha, the shivim umais, imbalance, rejection of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence in our lives, v'chule v'chahena, hopelessness at the core. I'm rejecting that. Habai mi isha zayna, which comes from that inyan of malchus de sitrach, shivcha bisha, shiva bechinas mipnei sarai gevirti anaychi barachas. And connecting yourself to the Gevir, to the Gevirta, which is the inyan of Malchus to Kedusha. And you know what happens then? Like Hagar says, Mipnei Sarai Gevirti Anoichi Bayrachas. Hagar in this context is the Taiva, is the Shivcha. Sha Taiva Bayrachas V'nefredas Mimena. Mipnei Sarai Gevirti. What does Sarai mean? Why was she called Sarah? Srara, right? Like the female version of Sar. Rulership. Malchus. Sarah's Malchus. Mipnei Sarai Gevirti Anoichi Barachas. You know how the Taiva goes running away? Because of Sarai Gevirti. Malchus, the Kedusha, not the Shivcha Bisha. But if that doesn't happen, Azai Bebechinas Shivcha Kitirish Gevirta. Shivcha Tirish Gevirta. Instead of the Taiva running away, the Shivcha takes over. So here we finish. Because believe it or not, in these two psukim, Shema Yisrael and Baruch Shem, there are 12 words. Neged Shnei Masur Shiftei Ka, which is astounding enough. But get this, because this you can't make up. How many letters are there in the 12 names of the Shevatim? 49. How many letters are there in Shema Yisrael and Baruch Shem? Is 49. The arba invitation oisios. Can I get an arba invitation oisios shebishmais shiftei ka pil a plaim pil a plaim. Hu bekabalas all malchus shmayim. And when a person is mekabel all malchus shmayim, bechinas yam shel shlomo, because yam is the inyan of binah, because gematria nun, and shlomo is the inyan of malchus. When a person makes a yichud, malchus and binah, final Hey Yud Kei Vav Kei is reflecting the higher Hey Yud Kei Vav Kei, that ideal reality where Hashem's presence is revealed. Hu nifrad minishma seim the Eirev Rav sheishiv chabisha isha zayna. He separates himself from the souls of the Eirev Rav, which is the shiv chabisha, which is the isha zayna. V'nichlal b'nishma shiftei ka. And we become part of the Jewish nation again. Isha yiras Hashem. And we become part of those who live in a world of hope, who live in a world of bittul, who live in a world of trusting Hashem's master plan, who live in a world of knowing that no matter what I'm going through, there's no hopelessness. I can cry out to Hashem. I can call out to Him. Everything is part of a process. I live in a structure. I live in a system of progress. Then a person covers their eyes. At the time of Kabbalas Ol Malchus Shemayim laHayros shal yidei Kabbalas Ol Malchus Shemayim bebechinas ulemta shapirta deles le'einin. Instead of using my eyes for lowly things, I'm covering my eyes and saying, Baruch Shalom, I don't even have eyes. What eyes? I don't have eyes. I don't know. Instead of trying to look where a person shouldn't look, I don't have eyes. I'm following you. And once a person is misaking this and is no longer living in a world of keri, is no longer living in a world of kriras, of hopelessness, of wild abandon as a result of me feeling that there's no structure anymore, then the other taivas fall into line. But this is the essence. If we can get this, and if we can mamish accomplish this, work on this toil in this area, mamish level after level in a million bechinas, and all different ways to cleanse this area. So then we have separated our neshama from the nishmas Eirev Rav, and we're ready to rejoin Klal Yisrael, and to live in the consciousness of progress, to live in the consciousness of hope, to live in the consciousness of knowing that all the challenges that we're going through are moments before the birth of a more wonderful and redemptive iteration of our very own selves. Kadosh Baruch Hu should help us not just learn these things, but lelamed lishmar v'lasei l'kayim. Be'ezras Hashem, wishing everyone a wonderful Shabbos up ahead.
אני הבן ואתה האב שלי שכל כך אוהב אותי האב שלי מלך חי וקיים על כל נשימה שאני